So Elon Musk just left Doge. He's gone back to running Tesla and all of his other profitable companies. President Trump right now is in the middle of trying to get the big, beautiful bill passed in Congress. And boy, he is facing an uphill battle on the Senate side. And now Elon Musk, who's arguably one of the most singularly important individuals in terms of helping President Trump get reelected with his financial contributions, just stated the following on X a day or two ago about the big, beautiful bill. Quote, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it." That's from Elon Musk, and I don't think he's wrong. Let's talk about it. Hey guys, welcome to the Shermichael Singleton Show. I'm your host, Shermichael Singleton. I want to know what you think about this big, beautiful bill. Drop the comments below. Share this video. Make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube if you're following us on YouTube. If you're watching us on We The Free, make sure you share it on your social media. And if you're on YouTube, head on over to We The Free, wethefree.com, and become a member for more uncensored news. Elon Musk is definitely a friend of President Trump. He's a loyal supporter of President Trump, and he's definitely risked and lost a lot. Tesla's profits right now are down 71%. For him to come out with that post really shows you that Elon Musk was serious, guys, when he said, "I'm coming to help President Trump and Republicans restructure America's fiscal house because there's a dilemma. The United States can't continue this way." In fact, we know what the data states. The data states in the next 10 years, the federal deficit will be the #1 line item on the federal budget. We know in the next 50 years, or at least by 2050, I should say, the debt is expected to be 180%, double the GDP, essentially meaning we won't even produce enough yearly to pay it down. This is unsustainable. Elon Musk, being a business guy, knew that, knows that, went to Washington with Doge with the idea of trying to correct it. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that Doge attempted to do was effective. They could have done some things better. And Elon Musk has even acknowledged that. Hell, we have to acknowledge that there's some things that could have gone a little better. But the premise, what they were attempting to do to bring back to the forefront of not only members of Congress, but also every American out there was, look, our fiscal house is in shambles. And if we don't get it fixed, we're leaving a burdensome amount of debt for generations to come that's going to be completely disruptive to the United States standing in the world. And I think that's why Elon Musk did what he did. He came up with this post yesterday, and now that tweet or that post on X has given a license, a green light, to Republicans in the House and the Senate to come out and say, look, we're not supporting this. We don't like it. There's not enough cuts. And they're not wrong. So when we as conservatives, and what conservatism to me is really about, and one of its defining principles has always traditionally been fiscal conservatism. There's no doubt about that. But why is that is the bigger question. Why have we as conservatives, why am I as a conservative so darn dogmatic about being fiscally conservative? Well, this concept is a central conservative worldview. It has been going all the way back to Edmund Burke. For me, fiscal conservatism, guys, is really grounded in a commitment to responsibility, prudence, and the preservation of societal stability. And that's why Elon Musk is coming out and saying this bill is disgusting. It's an abomination because it's filled with pork. It doesn't preserve society's stability. It doesn't give generations to come a orderly financial and fiscal order so that they can continue to build and maintain America's greatness. No, it puts them at a serious disadvantage from generations of the past, and Congress needs to do something about it. And part of doing something about it is cutting spending. You can't have expansive tax cuts but still maintain ridiculous spending levels. Now, granted, the White House's position on this is predicated that we're going to see robust growth. That's fine. We can see good growth. That still is not enough to cut down the $36 trillion in debt that we already currently have. That's ballooning. And by 2050, it's going to be almost $100 trillion. I mean, that's insane. And so it's not just about numbers on a balance sheet. It reflects a deep philosophical belief about the role of government and the capacity of individuals to shape their own destinies. Now, I believe, and I think many of you believe, government should intervene sparingly, act with caution, and above all, respect the limits of its power, because government does have a lot of power. But when governments overspend, something that you and I can't do in our own personal lives, when government overextends itself, overpromise, it distorts the fundamentally important natural rhythms of the free market, and it jeopardizes the long-term health of the very institutions that the government is supposed to protect. You and I can't do this in our personal lives. We could get kicked out of our houses, out of our apartment. We'd have to file for personal bankruptcy. And yet, our federal government operates in such a way where it can just do whatever it wants. That has to change. No company could do this. No household could do this. Why have we for so long allowed the individuals we vote to go and represent our interests right here on Capitol Hill do what none of us could do in real life? And so at the heart of fiscal conservatism for me are four core tenets. And I want to really talk about this, guys. I'm going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb because I don't want it going off in real time. Sometimes this happens when we're filming the show. But I want to talk about these four tenets. The first one for me being limited government spending. This is really important. And for this reason, excessive spending really distorts market signals. It breeds inefficiencies and it often leads to inflation, which we're still trying to get out of. And we saw that because we had a significant spending out of COVID, if you need a more recent point of reference. And so I fundamentally believe that when government lives within its means, it allows markets to allocate resources here and there more effectively, and it empowers you, the citizen, rather than controlling you by virtue of having to tax the hell out of all of us, because they're more than likely going to tax working class and middle class and maybe sort of middle tier, upper middle class individuals before they tax those at the 1%. And that needs to change in some ways, in my opinion, as well. Second, low taxation. I've always believed people and businesses are better stewards of their own resources than any bureaucracy. Lower taxes shouldn't just be for the 1%. It should be for everybody. Lower taxes should be for everyone. And I'll tell you why. It's a reward for working hard. It's a reward for driving innovation, and it's a reward for promoting investment, not just from big corporations, but for the little guy out there. And that's how you create real sustainable economic growth. The third tenet for me is balanced budgets. Now, hell, we haven't balanced a budget and I don't know how long. Now, let me ask you this question, and you let me know in the comments below. How many times you have to balance your budget every month? Some people have to balance their budgets weekly. Hell, some have to do it every single day to make sure they have enough money to last them from the moment they wake up to the minute they drop those kids off, to the minute they pick them up, to the minute they're trying to cook dinner. That's how real this really is for a lot of people out there. So balanced budgets are important. Borrowing from future generations, which is what the federal government has done and is even doing with this bill to satisfy today's appetites, is not just reckless, it is immoral. I don't live my life that way. You don't live your life that way. And so the question is, where in the hell are the fiscal conservatives? Fiscal conservatives like myself argue for balanced budgets because unsustainable debt puts our national sovereignty, our economy, and ultimately our children's futures at risk. I have a 4-month-old. I'm thinking about her future. I'm thinking about my future grandchildren. I want a fiscal house that's in order. And the fourth economic principle is economic freedom. Now, guys, fiscal restraint safeguards individual liberty. And when the state grows too large, and we have seen this over COVID, I mean, the federal government just grew and grew. When it grows too large, it inevitably crowds out personal choice and responsibility. A leaner state means a freer citizen because it frees up your money. The federal government doesn't need to tax us as much. And now I'd like to bring in a perspective from someone who I have long respected. I don't know if you've heard of this guy before. His name is Sir Roger Scruton. He passed away a couple of years ago from cancer. A brilliant conservative philosopher, was considered the Edmund Burke of the 20th, 21st century. And Roger Scruton was a man whose writings have really influenced minds. I mean, deeply influenced how I think about conservatism. Scruton never approached these issues from merely an economic or utilitarian standpoint. For him, fiscal conservatism was a moral imperative. And so by that, I mean it was an extension of what he called okophilia, a love of home, because Scruton always argued conservatives are principally concerned with the preservation of the home, because as Roger Scruton once wrote, or once said many times, he would frequently use this phrase, it is much easier to destroy than it is to build. And he would say that in his critique of liberalism while trying to protect why conservatism as a philosophy is so important to the preservation of our Western society and ideals. Now, Scruton, responsible for financial management was something that, or being responsible, I should say, for financial management was something that he cared a lot about. It wasn't just about policy, it was an act of stewardship. And he argued in many of his writings, we inherited institutions, traditions, and communities from those who came before us. Therefore, it's our duty to preserve them for those who come after. Reckless government spending, rising debt, and inflation all threatens that inheritance. They undermine trust in institutions and erode the cultural moral fabric of our society. And I'm bringing up Roger Scruton here because I think he is so important, guys, as we think about debt in this country, as we think about this big, beautiful bill, as President Trump wants it to be called. As we think about these things, I want to bring up someone who reminds us as conservatives of what our number one responsibility should be, and that's the preservation of our society for the next generation. And so Roger Scruton, if you read his writings, and you would know he was deeply skeptical of the expanding state. He wrote and lectured a lot about it because he believed correctly, I think, that when government tries to do too much, it infantilizes its citizens. And we're seeing that right now. He argued that fiscal conservatism then is a necessary check against the overreach of the state. I think he was right in his arguments about that. So in my mind, this is really about ensuring that power remains close to the people and not concentrated in distant bureaucracies. Roger Scruton, again, sort of informed my beliefs on this point. And so when I look at this bill and I look at what Elon Musk said in that post on X, he was so right. He was so in sync with what Roger Scruton articulated so much throughout his life as really like the godfather of philosophical conservatism. Now, Roger also viewed economic discipline as a form of respect. And this was something when I was reading some of his old writings, it just reminded me just how profound this guy was as an intellectual. It was a discipline as a form of respect for traditions, for institutions, and for the accumulated wisdom of past generations. And he went on to argue that it's irresponsible policy for our economics to essentially bleed stability, to bleed reverence for being stoic in how we spend and responsible in how we spend, and to not care about what each of those decisions and the burdens of those decisions would have on generations to come and the sanctity of our society long term. He was so right about this. And so perhaps more powerfully to me, when you think about economics as a moral practice, it isn't just about outcomes. It's about our obligations as a society. Excessive taxation, bloated deficits, these aren't just bad ideas. They're literal violations of the social contract that we all have. Governments don't exist, in my view, to serve themselves. Governments exist to serve the citizens. But that's not how they operate. They've been exploitive in nature. Our own government in this country. Tax, tax, tax. Outsource all the jobs. They don't particularly care about working class and middle class people. That has to change. And the only way you can change that is to get our fiscal house in order. And so fiscal conservatism to me is not merely a matter of balancing the books, and that is important, but it is a reflection of our society's respect for our heritage, our institutions, and our obligations to future generations. And to squander our resources as recklessly as we have done and as we're preparing to do in this new bill is to betray the trust of those who came before us and those who will come after. So, in my opinion, guys, prudence, restraint, and a sense of moral duty must guide our economic policies, lest we undermine the social fabric that holds communities together. And so for me as a fiscal conservative, it's not just a policy preference. It's not just some fancy post you put on X or a tokenized phrase you use in a Fox News interview or when you're battling the libs on CNN. It's a reflection of character. It's a philosophy rooted in gratitude, humility, and duty. It's about doing the hard thing today so that our children, our grandchildren don't have to suffer for our foolish behavior and the consequences tomorrow. In an age of short-term gratification and political expediency, I believe that's a message that's not merely worth repeating. It's a message that's worth believing in. And so when you see that post, bring that post back up. When you see that post from Elon Musk, and he says it's outrageous. This pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it because they know they did wrong. He's right. And that's why I brought up Roger Scruton, one of the greatest conservative philosophers of all time. Because sometimes we talk about these things in terms of balance sheets. But as Roger Scruton reminds us, as he reminded me as someone who studied political philosophy throughout my matriculation in undergrad, these are things that are worth preserving because they have moral and intrinsic importance and character to our values in the West. And if we are to leave something worth protecting, worth guarding, worth having a sense of pride in, it has to be our financial and fiscal house. Because if we destroy that, everything else will also crater. Because you need money for our very existence. You need money to exchange goods. You need money to build companies. You need money to build communities. And I'm not saying that money is an end-all be-all, but it is and does have intrinsic value to the growth and prosperity of our society. And if Republicans on Capitol Hill don't understand that, then they be damned. And my message to you would be to vote for better people. You deserve better. Our country deserves better. I am a conservative because I strongly believe that there are so many fundamental aspects of who we are as people that are worth conserving, that are worth preserving. Our customs, our norms. I don't view us as liberals do. Whereas trends change, we just adapt them. And we perpetually adapt them and adapt them and adapt them until we get to a point where we don't even recognize the values that we once inherited. You know how destructive that is to society. And so why aren't we seeing more conservative Republicans stand up to protect what we have inherited from the previous generation so that we may pass on something even greater, even better? We're not doing that. $36 trillion in debt and growing. The largest expense on the federal budget by 2030. 180% of GDP by 2050. That's not something worth conserving. That's something worth throwing in the trash, discarding, and starting all over again. But Roger Scruton also said this: at some point, all things must come to an end because nothing lasts forever. And maybe we're at that precipice. This is not a serendipitous moment that we find ourselves in. And so shouldn't we not govern ourselves accordingly while we still have a chance? Because again, nothing lasts forever, as Scruton reminds us. While we still have a chance to maintain the West's superiority, let's do so now. If not for our own sanctity, for the sanctity of our children, grandchildren, and generations to come. I'm Sir Michael Singleton. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think about Elon Musk? Do you think Republicans are even fiscally conservative anymore? Or do you think they only serve their own masters, their donors, the rich lobbyists, and have forgotten about you, the hardworking person out there? Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.